All right, greetings everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Uniting for a Just Local Food System Through Healthy School Meals for All Policies. This is the first in a two-part series with a lot of great folks from the state of Colorado, taking a deep dive into their Healthy School Meals for All policy. So today we're going to be taking a deep dive into their policy pathway and overview. But before we begin, I want to introduce Valentina, who's going to be doing some interpretation for us. Valentina, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Valentina, and I'm here on behalf of Community Language Cooperative, and I'm here to provide and guarantee your commitment to language justice. Language justice is a type of simultaneous interpretation that seeks to create spaces in which no one language is dominant, spaces in which everyone can participate with the language of their heart. So to achieve this objective, we'll be using Zoom's interpretation feature. And what you will see in a couple of minutes is a new little button that looks like a globe will appear on the bottom bar of your screen. On that same bar where you have the buttons for the microphone, for the chat, for the video, etc. It'll be towards your right hand. When you see this new little button come up, go ahead and click on it and select either English or Spanish as both the language that you will be listening into and speaking into. If you are joining the meeting on a phone or on a tablet, you will find the same options by clicking on the button with the three little dots on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. That button reads more. Hola a todos, a todas y a todos. Buenas tardes, buenos días. Mi nombre es Valentina y estoy aquí por parte de Community Language Cooperative para ofrecerles y garantizar su compromiso con la justicia del lenguaje. La justicia del lenguaje es un tipo de interpretación simultánea que busca crear espacios en los que no domine ningún idioma, espacios en los que todos puedan participar con el idioma de su corazón. Para lograr este objetivo vamos a utilizar la función de interpretación de Zoom. Lo que verán en un par de minutitos es que aparecerá un nuevo botón en la barra inferior de su pantalla que parece un globo terráqueo en esa misma barra donde tienen los botones para el micrófono, para el video, para el chat, etc. Vendrá hacia su mano derecha. Cuando vean este botoncito aparecer, hagan clic en él y seleccionen inglés o español como el idioma en el que desea escuchar y el idioma en el que desea participar. Si usted está en esta reunión por medio de un teléfono o de una tableta, encontrará las mismas opciones para la interpretación haciendo clic en el botón que tiene 3 puntitos en la esquina inferior derecha de su pantalla. Ese botoncito dice More o Más. A quick reminder for those of you that do prefer to use English during this meeting, Spanish is 20 to 25% longer than English, so please keep a conversational pace when you do participate so that I can communicate your message in Spanish. If you have any questions or any issues whatsoever with this technology, please let the whole group know by means of the chat box so that we can work together to address it. Un breve recordatorio es que la interpretación es simultánea, entonces por favor mantenga un ritmo de conversación cuando participe y si tiene alguna pregunta o algún problema con esta tecnología, comuníqueselo al grupo completo a través del chat para que lo podamos resolver. Muchas gracias por tenerme por acá. Ahora vamos a activar los canales de interpretación. Thank you so much for having me here. We can go ahead and start the interpretation channels now.
Thank you so much, Valentina. All right. So my name is Ryan Betts. I'm a policy specialist with the National.
Yo soy un especialista con la red de la granja a la escuela nacional y estoy como nuestra misión, quiero comunicarles, es aumentar el acceso a la comunidad, a la comida local y trabajar con las comunidades vibrantes. Es nuestra misión poder ver una nación en la que los programas de la granja a la escuela sean un componente esencial en los sistemas locales y regionales, asegurando la salud de las niñas, granjas, el ambiente, la economía y las comunidades. Entonces, ¿por qué de la granja a la escuela? Aquí ganan tres partes. Las niñas que participan comen más verduras, cortamos también las cadenas de suministro y ganan los granjeros y también ganan las comunidades porque se mantiene el conocimiento localmente. Entonces, la granja a la escuela mantiene la intersección de estos sectores como también educación, salud pública, desarrollo económico y el ambiente. Entonces, ¿qué es de la granja a la escuela? Cuando decimos de la granja a la escuela, hablamos sobre la actividad de apoyo para que las comunidades tengan alimentos saludables para que las niñas aprendan también sobre la comida.
One defined program, but collectively farm to school activities empower children and their families to make informed food choices while strengthening local economy and contributing to communities. So this also, it is not just limited to like, kind of traditional K through 12 schools, but also farm to early care and education, where farm to ECE programs encourages health and wellness, experiential learning, and family and community engagement, especially at a time when children are, they're just in such a formative year where they're formative years where they're learning so much about the world and developing, an understanding about many different things. So this can include child care centers, family child care homes, also preschools, nurseries, Head Starts, so on and so forth. So our network is more than 20,000 members, nearly 200 partner organizations. We're made up of a national advisory board and a national staff. And we're going to be sharing more information at the end of today's presentation on how you can join us and become a partner. So as a network, we serve as a hub for connecting people to. So we serve as a hub for information, connecting people to resources, as a hub for networking, connecting people to people, and as a hub for advocacy, helping to connect people to policy. And we're part of a growing movement. Farm to school programs really started taking root in the 1990s, and then through the 2000s, really started to folks really kind of started to consolidate information into one clearinghouse. And then in 2007, that's when the National Farm to School Network launched. So over the past several decades, the farm to school movement has grown from a handful of schools to all 50 states, DC, and US territories today. And at National Farm to School Network, where we are right now, our main call to action is 100% of communities will hold power in a racially just food system. So like I've kind of mentioned before, we have a vision of a strong and just food system for all, and we seek deep transformation towards that vision through farm to school. So, and we acknowledge that inequities based on race persists, and we will not achieve a racially just food system if we do not dismantle those inequities. And flowing from this call to action, are our values. We're rooted in these 6 values of economic justice, environmental justice, health impact, racial equity, respecting workers and educators, and animal welfare. And this is kind of what we're going to be exploring a little bit more in today's conversation, is how healthy school meals for all policies, how farm to school and these values can all align to do even more than just serve students really great meals, but really help to transform local community food system. So as we kind of segue into our conversation with our speakers today, I wanted to give a quick landscape of where universal meals policies kind of where they've been and how they've been growing, and they have been growing in popularity. So this is a map as of December 2022. You can see as the federal nutrition waivers ended for nationwide free school meals for all, states began to slowly take it upon themselves to adopt policies, past permanent policies, past temporary policies, or at least introduce policies. So just over from December 2022 to now, as of June 2023, we really see an explosion of really wonderful attempts by states to pass school meals for all policies. So we now see that we have 6 permanent policies, we have 3 temporary policies. Vermont just passed just passed, and their policy became law just maybe like a week or two ago. And also Illinois has a policy where both the state's House and Senate passed their universal meals bill. That happened in May, so now it just needs to be signed by their governor. So we may be even up to 7 permanent policies here before you know it. And you know, all of these policies, you know, they represent 33 states and DC, 47 plus million children, which is 65% of all U.S. children. So it's really amazing to see this response that has emerged as a result of the ending of federal waivers, to where you know, states really, and people within states and coalitions really see the importance of healthy school meals for all. And there is, you know, National Farm to School Network is excited about being part of a renewed nationwide effort. So we're happy to be joining in coalition with other organizations for National Healthy School Meals for All Coalition, because the time is now for a nationwide healthy school meals for all. But where we kind of sit within this conversation is, you know, we're asking the question, who's at the table for, you know, who's at the table for, you know, trying to really represent folks, everyone who's kind of like along the farm to school journey, you know, because we need a system of school meals that serves all kids and values the people who get it to the table. So we've been advocating for universal meals focused on equity for the most impacted stakeholders across the food system. And that's why we've created this campaign, basically to provide tools to communicate how our shared community values have the potential to radically transform our food system for the better. And we've been developing the resources to support these values aligned universal meals advocacy. So what we know, you know, the connection between farm to school and universal meals is that there is a strong connection between these policies and farm to school. So there's strong connection between farm to school policies, universal meals policies, and farm to schools and values-based purchasing are integral components of successful campaigns for universal meals. And that's what we hope to kind of be able to share a little bit more through Colorado's example. So, you know, there's this really rich overlap between universal meals, local food, community values, you know, to be able to connect all of these pieces, because they really support and build and grow into each other. You know, universal meals are going to help increase access to school meals, which, if you connect that with the local food piece, allows for more purchases from local producers, which could create more opportunities for scratch cooking, and that ultimately supports, you know, economic justice. You know, can create a real health impact, right? You know, impact racial equity, so on and so forth. And one more thing to share just before we kind of get started with our conversation with Colorado is, you know, we've been working to develop these different case studies that states have passed and are beginning to implement, you know, healthy school meals for all policies. You know, we want to be able to highlight the connections between farm to school and healthy school meals for all. So currently out, we have Maine and Vermont, and then coming soon is Colorado and California. And of course, I want to thank Gian for putting the links to all of these in the chat. So feel free to check them out, you know, when you have some more time. And without further ado, I just want to transition now into our conversation with our speakers to kind of discuss, you know, how folks in Colorado, you know, united to work to have their healthy school meals for all policy work towards transforming a just local food system for all. And so today we're going to hear from Patience Kabwasa and from Food to Power, and Tomas German-Palacios with the Good Food Collective. They're both two members of Colorado's Healthy School Meals for All Coalition. and they'll share insights on how their policy emerged, its role in strengthening the local food system, and how others can kind of replicate their success by asking who's at the table. And before I kind of pass it on to them, our hope for today is for a really rich conversation. So as we go through the slides, Patience and Tomas invite you all to engage and ask questions, be it about their policy design or their pathway, maybe their strategy, or anything else that you may be curious and learning more about. So I just want to invite you all to please feel free to add your question to the chat, or if you feel comfortable, just like raise your hand, and we'll be sure to welcome you to come off mute to ask and talk more with Patience and Tomas. But with that said, Patience, Tomas, welcome. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here with us today. And I'm gonna pass it over to y'all to maybe kind of introduce yourselves a little bit further, like who you are, so we can learn a little bit more about you, your organization, how you got connected with the coalition, and then tell us a little bit more about what's been happening in Colorado. So Patience, I'll pass it on to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Good afternoon, everyone, and just want to say welcome and thank you so much for joining this conversation. Healthy School Meals for All, or Universal Meals, is just so needed across our country. And so I just thank you so much for your interest in getting initiatives going in your own state if they're not already, and happy to just kind of fill in any questions that you might have in that process. My name again is Patience Kabwasa. I am the Executive Director of Food to Power in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which is in the southern quadrant of the state. Our mission at Food to Power is to cultivate a more equitable food system. So we really work in 4 pillars of action. As an organization, we are not just emergency food assistance. We really want to work around systems change and really affecting why people are in the free food line in the first place. So the way we do that in our organization is we have 4 pillars of action. 1, a no-cost grocery program, low-cost SNAP-supported farm stand market, and then we, in our education...
También de bajo costo de granjeros, y tenemos un pilar de educación y abogacía. Tenemos pasantías durante el verano y durante todo el año de participación e investigación. También permitirles a las niñas aprender a crecer comida, organizarse con su comunidad para construir comunidad y tener alimentos relevantes culturalmente. También tenemos talleres que van de compostas.
Making your grandma's favorite salsa, and we do it in a way where we like to stipend community members, or really kind of live into our values around community wealth building, and really kind of dismantling the idea of what educator, the gap between educator and community members, and really do it in a skill sharing format. We also know that policy is really, really important in systems change work. So we do work in coalition with different partners to support legislation, and in case of Healthy School Meals for All, really be on the front lines of that coalition, and informing our community, getting information out to voters so that folks were able to vote yes on Proposition FF. And then our production pillar is we are actively farming. We have about 3.5 acres of land. We're actively farming and have a food scraps service on about 1.5 acres. The produce then goes into the low-cost grocery market that's SNAP supported. And then our food scrap service is a member-based pickup where folks sign up and we pick up food scraps, turn it into compost that then feeds our farm, as well as has member kickbacks a couple of times of the year. So that said, we're really interested in Healthy School Meals for All, because lots of community members that we work with have children who are either on free and reduced lunch already, or they're right in the gap between being able to qualify for free and reduced lunch, but their families are still not able to afford meals. So we really wanted to support the availability of food, and pandemic showed us or lifted to the forefront. A lot of kids are only eating at school, so it was really important to us in just anti-poverty work so that we showed up in coalition for getting Prop FF passed. And I will pass it to Tomas.
Thank you so much, Patience, and thank you, Ryan, for the invitation to be here. And thank you all for your commitment to bringing healthy school meals across the nation. So my name again is Tomas German-Palacios, and I am working with the Good Food Collective. We are an organization, a small organization in the southwest corner of Colorado, in Durango, Colorado. And basically, we are working together with a variety of different partners all across our food shed to build a just and thriving food system down here. So we're kind of like connectors. We connect with the farmers, we connect with the food pantries, we connect kind of all through the entire food shed and food system locally here to create a more just and equitable food system. In addition to that, I also sit on our board of directors with the Manna Soup Kitchen, which is our regional soup kitchen and resource center throughout La Plata County. We also there grow a majority of our own produce that is then provided to the community. In addition to that, I am a functional medicine health coach. So really understanding and knowing what is healthy food is something that is not only dear to my heart, but is something that I am consistently studying. For those of you who aren't too familiar with functional medicine is a systems biology-based approach that focuses on identifying and addressing the root causes of disease. So kind of as an example, if somebody has depression, that might be an omega-3 deficiency. It might be due to antibiotic use. It might be due to prediabetes, vitamin D deficiency, low thyroid. A variety of different causes can cause a diagnosis or symptom. And so when this coalition was beginning to be formed, I saw this as an opportunity to really make an impact to assure that our future are not suffering the chronic diseases that so many of us are all across the nation. And with that, we can probably go forward. So Proposition FF, so that's our official name for the healthy school meals here in Colorado. However, before Proposition FF even became what it is, it was first a Senate bill, Senate Bill 22087. And it really, and we'll kind of dive into what Proposition FF did. The real basics is that the Senate bill was aiming to do the exact same things. We had four prime sponsors for that Senate bill: Brittany Peterson, Rhonda Fields, Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez, and Daphne Michelson Jennett. Despite their hard work and dedication, our Colorado legislature was not able to get this through. So on the back burner, our entire coalition was preparing to turn this into a House bill. So it turned into House Bill 1414, with the main objectives of the House bill was to create a system in which every public school system would be reimbursed. So the school food authorities would be reimbursed, and they have the option to participate in the program. So it is not a requirement. In addition to that, there are local food purchasing grants beginning in 2024 to allow eligible participating school food authorities to be able to purchase local food from our local farmers. So just like Ryan was saying earlier, this is closing the gap in terms of how far this food has to travel. For any of you who have studied, maybe botany or anything like that, the longer that the vegetable is off of the plant, and the longer it takes to make it to your table, the less nutrients that it has. In addition to that, what I know, at least in our area, with working with a lot of our local farmers, and this is true, really across the country. If you sit down and talk with a local food producer, they're growing their food in a very different way, making sure that that food is nutriently dense. So anyhow, to continue to kind of tell you about Proposition FF, in addition to that, the proposition provides funds so that there were additional, an increase in wages or stipends for our food school service workers. So I think everyone at some point in their life had a good relationship or somewhat of a relationship with the school lunch lady. Now, these are the people who are cooking and serving the food to our kids every single day, but they're barely making it. And so this part of Proposition FF was to give them the additional funds that they need to really live a healthy life themselves. In addition to that, there's technical assistance and grant funding so that the schools could purchase the necessary equipment so that they can actually cook from scratch, something that is really, really important. So I don't know if a lot of you guys know this, but many schools are just defrosting and microwaving their food. They don't actually have the equipment to be able to cook food from scratch. That's really kind of the overarching principles that are underneath the Proposition FF here in Colorado. The way that we were able to fund this program is by creating basically a reduction in tax deductions for taxpayers who have a federally adjusted gross income of $300,000 or more. That's how we did it in Colorado. It doesn't have to be the model that is done across the U.S., but that's what we did here, and that's what I think one of the major elements that allowed us to pass this proposition. Are there any thoughts or questions there? Otherwise, I'll kind of dive into why we believed in our coalition, why we needed to do this. Okay, let's dive into the why. All right, so I think the first one is pretty straightforward, and I don't think really anyone questions this. Children need healthy food to be able to learn in school. It's just a fact. Kids need all of the nutrients, the minerals, the vitamins that are in healthy food for their bodies to be able to function. And the fact of the matter is that many kids are going to school and they are not getting the nutrients that they need. They're not getting lunches. They kind of fall in the cracks between the free lunch program and the reduced lunch program. Their parents make just a little bit too much to make it in there, and they don't have the food at home. Or mom and dad at home either don't have time or they're not purchasing really healthy, nutriently dense food. So it's really, really important to make sure that our children are getting healthy meals at school. Second, it removes the stigma. So I don't know how many people out there were on the reduced or free lunch program, or if you at least had a friend while you're going to school. But the truth is that many kids are going to school and they opt not to eat at all because they don't want to be made fun of. They don't want to be the poor kid. And by having a healthy school meal, thank you, Jessica. I see that. I see you were. Thank you for having that vulnerability and saying that. A lot of kids just don't want to face the antagonizing of other kids. And by having a healthy school meals program, we remove that. In addition, we remove the administrative costs. So in order for these programs to run, there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of different people who have to do a lot of different tasks in order to process all of the applications. This removes that. This makes it straight across the board. all of the students are able to have free meals at school without any questions being asked. There's more, so that opens up for more resources for the schools and the staff. It creates an environment where the kids themselves are healthier and more thriving. When I was going around and talking with teachers all throughout our school districts here, I can't tell you how many teachers have a drawer full of food because they have kids in their classroom who are hungry. And even if they had lunch, they didn't, a lot of kids are not eating healthy things at school. And therefore, when they come to their classroom, they're not able to learn and they're falling asleep. So it's really important that we make sure that these students are having healthy meals. Last but not least, so with the program that we passed here in Colorado, the way that it works is the school districts are guaranteed to have 100% reimbursement for all the meals that are served to the students. Basically, in order to do that, there's kind of a variety of different things that have to happen. Without diving too deep into it, basically, the SFAs are required to opt in to annually be part of the program. So each year they have to opt in. They go through a process to do that. Let's see. Basically the Colorado state government requires that they're taking advantage of all of the federal food assistance programs. They have to check all the boxes for the CEP programs, all of that to basically, as much as possible, limit the burden onto the Colorado taxpayer. But wherever that gap exists, that's where these funds come in and ensure that every student in Colorado public schools are getting fed healthy local school meals. And I'll pass that off to you, Patience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tomas, for that. And, it's really, we're all on this call, bleeding hearts. We care about children. We believe in just foundationally, kids should be able to eat. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I think you have to be flexible with the nuance of this. That message in and of itself doesn't always register with voters. And I think one of the beauties, or one of the reasons I think lots of folks in Colorado who were involved in getting Prop FF passed are just kind of basking in that victory, is that this really exemplified just the foundational principles of our democracy and how it's supposed to work. And being able to take a proposition before the voters so that they can have direct influence on laws and policies was really, really important. And because Prop FF didn't pass initially in the legislature, we had to take it to the voters. And so that said, really knowing the landscape and the backdrop of your voters is really important as you're crafting messaging on what to do. So in Colorado, we have a very diverse landscape. We are a purple state. We have voters, we have a vast constituent base, and we can swing anywhere from Democratic to Republican and the issues that follow each of those partisans. So having messaging that just speaks to where people are was really, really important. We have urban voters that represent some of the largest cities like Denver and Colorado Springs and Aurora. A significant amount of the population, and they tend to be more Democratic or liberal leaning. They're often younger, more diverse. They have higher levels of education, but like places like Colorado Springs, where I live, we do have a large populace, but traditionally we have been more libertarian or conservative. So we don't kind of meet we're not Denver. We have to talk differently here in order to resonate with our voters. El Paso County, which is where Colorado Springs resides in, has a good mix of both urban and rural areas. And so in 2019, just to give an example, across the state, farms represented over 38,000, there were 38,000 farms in Colorado, and ranches that represented over almost close to 32 million acres. And the market value of those dollars is about $7.8 billion. So contributing in all areas in our economy, close to $47 billion. So and jobs that people who work in ranching or farming is close to 200,000. So as you can see, agriculture represents a huge portion of our state, and we really needed to be able to talk to different constituent bases. The suburbs are often moderate and independent voters. They're more physically conservative, but maybe socially liberal. And so they often vote on issues like education and healthcare and the economy. Rural farmers are usually more socially conservative and Republican leaning. So, you know, they are more interested in things like gun rights and property rights and limited government. Our mountain regions are usually wealthier voters, and they prioritize issues like outdoor recreation, environmental protections, and things like that. So, but they also have a history of kind of swinging both ways. So they're not really, you can't just put them in one category. Additionally to that, Colorado has this law called TABOR, and it's actually a constitutional amendment, which is, it stands for the Tax Bill of Rights, which means its aim was to limit the growth of government or the influence of government. So it means any tax increase that is proposed has to go before the voters. And as you can probably imagine, most people, so it has to go before the voters, and any surplus actually goes back to Colorado taxpayers. So as you can imagine, people don't most likely vote to increase their taxes. And so that said, we did have some challenges getting Prop FF passed, and we really had to kind of think through our messaging. I think this is really, you know, timing is everything. And this is where the pandemic really worked in our favor, because as a nation, in a state, you know, we got to see lots of things: food insecurity, job losses, economic hardship. Also, you know, families not being able to afford food, going to the grocery store and shelves were empty, you know, school closures, and some of school meals, I mean, we, as you know, represent the only meal that some students are getting in a day. And so I think that these hardships between 2020 and 2022 really kind of created a ripe environment for us to be able to put a legislation like this in front of the voters. And I'm not saying that to say like time has passed, because it absolutely has not. We're still experiencing, or we're in a different iteration of the pandemic. So we are still experiencing lots of the issues of why people are food insecure in the first place. So this is really a good time to get those ballot measures in front of your voters or your Senate or your House of Representatives. Additionally, you know, disparity in access was highlighted between certain neighborhoods, particularly those who were predominantly BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And there were lots of supply chain disruptions and what farmers were able to get to market in the first place, because restaurants were closing, which reduced revenue. You know, they had to spend more money in protection for workers, but weren't necessarily gaining that revenue back in the market through their crop sales. And so there was really lots of financial strain, I think, in school cafeterias. You know, they often run like a business on a very tight budget. And so because of that, there is lots of punitive consequences. Like if you have no lunch money, you get an alternative lunch, as Tomas was mentioning. Lots of teachers have a drawer full of, you know, and some of snacks. And often, like what we were hearing from parents, was some version of cheese and crackers. So, you know, think about a student going to school and not being able to eat, and being offered cheese and crackers to make it through the rest of the day, and hoping that they're not going to behaviorally act up. It really doesn't make sense. But this is what teachers and school administrators and cafeteria workers were facing. So with this diverse voting climate, we really did, have to lean into the power of coming together and really think through different messagings, strategies to speak to those different community constituents. And so we, had to talk about what the economy, what it meant locally for folks to be able to lean into, yep, okay, this is going to be taxed, but this is actually going to generate revenue in the economy. And the way that it would do that is it provides, cafeteria workers the ability to be able to hire more people. It's going to, we have lots of farms in El Paso County and Colorado Springs, and as well as the rest of the state. So the ability to be able to directly sell or get their products, their produce to school districts was really appeasing, and like really focusing in on that messaging. Based on who we were talking to, we looked to places like California and kind of leaned into their messaging to help us through that, building coalitions that represented teachers, they represented parents, they represented school administrators, churches, church groups, community leaders, really broadening our base so that based upon who we were talking to, again, we could talk about academic performance or the reduction of obesity, improving health outcomes, or again, getting, generating money in the economy, connecting, even scratch cooking, right? Having more resources in the cafeteria does allow cafeteria workers to be able to invest in scratch cooking, which eventually, I think from an educator's perspective, one of the potentials that was also appeasing was that eventually it can bolster the farm to school movement. It can help students be able to be a part of the process and learning of where food comes from. It doesn't come from the grocery store. You have to grow it. And, having students be involved in that process, I think also spoke to educators. But it was really important to develop clear messages that highlight the benefit and the importance of healthy school meals for all students, and really stick to taglines that were really hard to argue. So even though on the surface it might not have resonated with all peoples, but like all kids should eat is really a hard message to argue against. And you can come at it from the economy, you can come at it from the local food and supply chain, you can come at it from scratch cooking in the cafeteria, but really just foundationally staying on, all kids should have the ability to be able to eat. They need it to perform. It's how is this going to bolster our economy? This is Colorado's future, right? These are the future leaders we are handing the state over to. They're not nourished and they're not educated and they're not learning. It's going to affect us all. Really, in that process, engaging decision makers, scheduling meetings with local school board members, district administrators, elected officials to discuss the different elements of healthy school meals for all, and why they should commit to supporting this proposition was really, really important. Getting them at your press conferences, having them hold signage was really important, because they're standing in front of their constituent bases saying, hey, I absolutely support this bill. And, 8 times out of 10, their constituent base is going to follow. Being prepared with the data and the research to support those legislators. The truth of the matter is often we do the heavy lift for them. They don't have time to research a particular ballot initiative or proposition, and they need you to do the research and tell them why, so that they can be the mouthpiece and speak to their communities about why a certain proposition or healthy school meals for all should be supported. And then really mobilizing your community in your advocacy efforts. This can look like street teams or canvassing teams. You might have super volunteers in your organization who you are even able to stipend to help you organize these canvassing efforts, getting flyers and literature out to community members, holding focus groups, showing up at food banks with this literature, hosting nutritional workshops that, this literature is available, answering questions. And I can say that in El Paso County, like I said, we have a more conservative bent. Proposition FF passed by 750 votes. So we know that it was every conversation, it was those focus groups, it was the canvassing, it was speaking with elected officials, it was tapping into the media, it was holding press conferences. All of these things helped to make that environment ripe so that we could really get this proposition passed across the state of Colorado. And now we're in the implementation phase. And I will pass it to, I think this is just the time in our presentation that I just want to open it up for questions. I know we've been throwing lots of information at you, but if you have questions or if there's some in the chat that have already been lifted up, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind reading those, and Tomas and I can do our best to answer them.
Yeah, thank you all so much, Patience, Tomas. And Tomas, I've already seen that you've been kind of replying to some of the questions, and I apologize if I get some of these out of order as they've been asked. But one question is from Bailey. They'd love to know more about sources or strategies to get funding for state campaign costs. Is our main barrier to doing this in our state.
Yeah, I would say, so we worked in coalition, and Tomas can add anything that I leave out here. We worked in coalition with Hunger Free Colorado, who was able to tap into national funders like the American Heart Association. They were really creative in kind of making the case of why, how this was going to reduce or finding the funding priorities of different foundations to kind of make the case of why Healthy School Meals for All was important. To that, I think tapping into also so there's national foundations, but there's also your state foundations that focus on health equity specifically, are other foundations that you could tap into for campaign strategies. As long as it's issue-based, you're not supporting a particular candidate. As long as you're focusing on an issue, you can really be creative with how you use those funds.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, so, like many of the organizations that were part of our coalition, like the Good Food Collective, we're a 501c3. But so basically we could go out and campaign and ask up to like a certain point in terms of how much money we were bringing in. There was a cutoff, and that had to do with the basically the bottom line of the organization, in our case our fiscal sponsor. So I think for us it was something like $1 million or something like that we were able to bring in without having a 501c4. I don't know or remember all of the details on that, but really kind of coming back to be able to fund the actual campaign, exactly what Patience said. Tap into local foundations, state foundations, federal foundations. As Ryan kind of showed on an earlier slide, there are a number of organizations, the American Heart Association. I'm looking at another slide here. The School Nutrition Association, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. There's a large amount of organizations that you can tap into and find some types of funding to be able to fund your campaign in your state.
Awesome, thanks y'all. And I'm gonna try to kind of combine two questions here, but one that just came in was from Maria. I'd be curious to know how schools and farmers are being connected. Is there a nonprofit nonprofit that helps with the sourcing and procurement of fruits and vegetables, or is it directly on the individual school and or the individual farm to form their own connections? And I think that also speaks a little bit to Austin's question too about maybe trying to work to get their microgreens into schools. So maybe can we speak a little bit to how that might be happening in Colorado, if there's those connections being made, if there's an organization helping to do it, especially as it relates to the new policy?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that there's one specifically as it relates to the new policy. I think there's been orgs working in the background to do this in an informal way, one of them being Uproot Colorado, who kind of works across the state to glean produce and get it to community, who probably would be really helpful in the infrastructure of helping different regions do that. I know the Pueblo Food Project is also doing, regional work in Southern Colorado. I would say individual nonprofits are picking that up. I do think that this is an area for strategy that as we go into this implementation phase to kind of think about that via region, because we do, Colorado is a large state and has kind of a mass populace depending upon where you are, Front Range or rural, and it looks different for different communities to be able to get food from school districts. But the point being is, I think, there is help here to kind of support the administrative and technical assistance. And in my mind, that could look like, a job at the school district dedicated to resourcing that produce in that particular community.
I was just looking at some of the other responses and questions in here. So yes, like as Rebecca Robbins said, Nourish Colorado is is currently the technical assistance provider for Colorado, and yes, basically there's some new employees in the Colorado Department of Education School Nutrition Unit that is focused specifically on healthy school meals. What I can say, I always kind of get down to where it really happens, So first of all, when we were working all throughout here in the Southwest, we were talking with farmers, we were talking with school administrators, and we were telling them to get together. And we were actually bringing them to the table to find out what their thoughts were. So that's when those connections honestly were being made. We in Durango, where I am now, we already prior to this had a farm to school program. So a lot of the farmers in the schools were already talking and kind of building that connection. And what this program actually is doing is greatly expanding upon that existing program. But basically it's, look, I would not be so surprised that a lot of the farmers know a lot of the teachers or school administrators. They need to talk. They need to figure out what they need to do. Our organization here in Southwest Colorado, the Good Food I want to say coalition because that's stuck in my head. The Good Food Collective is that intermediary. So we are the intermediary between schools and farms and hospital and a variety of other entities. That's one of the things that we do. But I think there's a variety of different methodologies to do it. Get together in a town hall, figure out what you guys need to do, because ultimately it comes back to that principle. It's gonna raise the economic justice for our local farmers. Let's face it, a lot of our local farmers across the nation are having a really hard time too. Having that connection to the school district gives them a steady flow to bring, and steady demand to bring their food too. So get active in your community is what I'm going to say. Get on the ground, start talking to the farmers, start talking with the school administrators, start talking with the nutrition professionals at the schools, and make those connections.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. David asked if there's any tips on how state coalitions can support coalition members or community leaders in this work, and what helped you all to engage with the Healthy School Meal for All Coalition.
I mean, I hate to bring it back to funding, but, when statewide organizations have the ability to partner with local nonprofits who are running on a shoestring budget, which we always are, we are able to employ other community members to help do some of the groundwork that Tomas was talking about, like all of that, to do good organizing and getting community and canvassing hundreds and hundreds of households takes time. It takes staff in addition to our regular work. So the ability to support that work in particularly, I think this is also helpful when statewide coalitions really recognize the voting patterns of different regions and support strategically, right? So Denver, for instance, might not need as much support as Colorado Springs, just because their voters tend to be a little bit more liberal or vote for social justice policies, whereas Colorado Springs might struggle. So we really have to spend more time doing the groundwork.
And really the only thing I have to add there, I mean, I know, like, here personally, throughout the Southwest, we are an agricultural community, throughout the entire Southwest. So that historically has meant that the region has been much more conservative. But when we went out and we started talking with the farmers and with the basically the friends and family of the farmers, which is basically our region, and started explaining, look, there's going to be direct funding for the farmers, which is going to sustain their livelihood. And on top of that, all of your kids or your neighbors' kids are going to be eating their local fresh produce. There was a direct connection there, and on a lot of other legislation that was kind of really more conservative leaning, they voted that way. But when it came to Proposition FF, Healthy School Meals for All, they moved their vote and went in a more liberal fashion.
Thanks, y'all. And I know we're getting close to time, so I'm going to go ahead and bring us back to the presentation. But thank you all again so much, Patience, Tomas, Valentina, also for helping provide interpretation. And we welcome everyone to please, this is just the first in a two-part series, and I think where we just left off the conversation is going to segue beautifully into the second part, where we're gonna welcome folks from Hunger Free Cauliflower. Geez, everyone's like, I'm a little hungry right now, but anyways, Hunger Free Colorado, to speak more to creating Colorado's coalition organizing for change, which is going to be a week from today. 3 p.m. Eastern. It'll be a little bit longer, 90 minutes. And we hope to take a little bit more of a deep dive into the intention behind the coalition, discuss some strategies, as well as growing support for how they grew that support for passage and now implementation. Also want to welcome everyone here on the call, if you aren't already, to think about, and we invite you to become a National Farm to School Network partner organization. So we'll be dropping the link in the chat, or you can always go onto our website and find us there. But again, thanks to Patience, Tomas, Valentina, everyone who is here on the call and helping us, take a deeper dive into Colorado's work. And we really hope to see you all here again next week. So thanks again. Have a good one.